Hey, what's up, guys? Smaldor here, and I am here to do my thoughts, and this is going to be a review of Final Fantasy XVI. I'm going to make it as spoiler-free as possible. However, there might be some things here or there that might be slightly spoilery, depending on what you consider spoilery. In terms of like story points and characters and things like that, there will be no spoilers. However, keep in mind, again, depending on what you might consider spoiler, such as this right here, spoiler warning, you get multiple icons and multiple abilities throughout the game. You kind of figure this out pretty early on, so I don't really consider much of a spoiler, especially if you watch the trailers and things like this. Okay, this is going to be a little more comprehensive than some of my other thoughts videos, but it's Final Fantasy. I love Final Fantasy, as do many, many people around the world, obviously. If you've read any of social media posts, journalists, game reviewers, things like this, you would know that 16 right now is very divisive. I think that's the right word. In terms of, is this a Final Fantasy game? Is this game even good? This game sucks. This game is incredible. You got every end of the spectrum, and I'm going to give you my points on things. Of course, it's all my opinions, but I'm going to explain why, and you guys can maybe make the best, more information for you guys to make a decision on whether or not this is a game for you, or, things like that. So first off, I'm going to give everything like a rating. I'm going to be going over things of my overall feeling of the game, the music of the game, the combat, the story, the characters, the voice acting. And I put that in there because the game is like a 95% voice acted. So in a story-driven, narrative-focused game, that's important. The spectacle of the game. It's Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy has always been known as this spectacle marvel of anime slash JRPG fusion of just things that are like insanely epic. The difficulty of the game. Some Final Fantasies in the past have been very difficult. Some have actually been pretty easy. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the systems of the game. And when I talk about systems, I mean the controls, the performance, everything from that kind of stuff to navigating the menus, the purpose, the crafting system, things like that. That's not necessarily part of anything else that kind of fits into your gaming, the experience of playing the game. That's not necessarily tied to any of the things that I mentioned before. And then for funsies, how Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy 16, because a lot of people are saying this isn't Final Fantasy. Anyways, started off the overall, and I'm going to rate everything out of a 10. And numbers are arbitrary, but people like to have some kind of hard numbers or lettering system, so I'll give you both. Overall, this is an 8 out of 10 game for me. And I should say that I have beaten the game. This is an 8 out of a 10. That is my overall ranking of the game, or a B, maybe even like a B plus of a game. And I'm not saying that as a Final Fantasy game. I'm saying that as a game. As a video game, this overall is an 8 out of 10 for me. That's the only one I'm not going to give much of a detail about because that's going to encompass everything else before. I should have probably did that one last, but I'm not doing this video again. Music. Soken is like, they got so lucky in getting Soken to start doing their music after Uematsu cannot, because that he is the legacy of Final Fantasy. When you think of Final Fantasy, people to this day still think of him, right? All of that classical music, everything that's done. I mean, you have touring orchestras and concerts throughout the world that perform Final Fantasy music, and you think of him. And now having Soken coming in, I know it's not the first game, and I'm fully aware there are other people that work on the music as well. But these are just the primaries and the big names that are going along with it. The music in this game is a 10 out of 10 banger from the first 20 seconds of the game essentially to the end. Now, I will put a little bit of a caveat in that there are some tracks that don't quite fit the theme of the game, in my opinion, but they're still like bangers in their own right. They just don't quite fit. I didn't feel they felt out of place, but there's I can count the number of those on like one hand. So the music in this game is honestly one of the best things about this game. It is phenomenal through and through. There's nothing bad I can say about the music other than some of the tracks don't fit the setting maybe, or they don't quite fit what's going on. Let's talk about the combat. A lot of people have talked about, you might see online about the combat being, the combat in Final Fantasy 16, it's very one-dimensional, blah, 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 blah. It's supposed to be so much more because, it's essentially done by the guy who did Devil May Cry 5, which the combat in Devil May Cry 5 is chef's kiss, the best action RPG you could possibly imagine. In my opinion, it's one of the greatest that there is. And, why are we going this why are we going this full action route? Final Fantasy's always been turn-based, the more tactical, choosing how, who goes when and blah, 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 what do you do on these moves. Look, Final Fantasy hasn't always been that way, and hasn't really been that way for a while. Final Fantasy 15 was pretty darn close to being an action game already. You just happen to have more party members. 7 Remake, kind of the same thing, except you can like stop time. It was like real time with pause, which is really cool. I do love the combat in Final Fantasy 7 Remake as well. Real time with pause, and you had party members. But Final Fantasy 14 is obviously MMO. Final Fantasy 13 did go back to the more turn-based stuff. Final Fantasy 12 was not turn-based. But it was a slower sense. And you had the gambit system. So, and I will say this, the combat is definitely what's presented, especially early on in the game. It feels simplistic, and it's much more... They were shooting for a game that's much more approachable to a broader audience. The entire game of 16 was... And it's kind of ironic to say this. It was designed to be for a larger audience and to try to get more people into the franchise, but it's also the first time that the mainline title is rated M. And so this game has a lot of swearing, and it gets pretty darn close to like full nudity. It doesn't quite, but it gets fairly graphic. The gore level is the highest that it's ever been in a numbered Final Fantasy game as well. So that's kind of interesting in that sense. Like, they're trying to make the game much more accessible and bring it a larger audience, but it's also restricting younger players. But this is a whole other topic about how like the average person who plays console and PC video games is actually like late 20s, early 30s as the average age of most people who play these kind of video games, or just video games in general. That's beside the point. But the combat gets much more complicated, or it can be more complicated the further you get in the game. The more you play the game, you unlock more things to make the game, the combat much more engaging, in my opinion. Now, can you play the game? Square, 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 hit a dodge button, square, 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 hit a dodge button, square, square. Yeah, you probably can. But one, okay, yeah, if you do that, the combat is going to be immensely boring. But the game gives you the tools to do way more than that. 2, I already said 2 or 3, whatever. The game's going to be extremely more difficult by doing that. The game gives you all these other tools to make the game not as difficult and challenging for arbitrary reasons. You are given so many tools to be able to customize the way that you play and you do the combat in the game, and it is smooth. The combat is super smooth. It is very flashy, sometimes maybe a little too flashy, to the point that I started avoiding using certain abilities because it was I looked like, yeah, it's like strobe lights going off. But hey, pretty colors. But yeah, the combat is not as bad as I think people were saying. And for what it is, it's awesome. It feels really good when you're pulling off things that you're intending to do and you're utilizing your kit to the fullest. And like I said, you can customize your kit pretty heavily, especially later on in the game. So my complaints about the combat is, and I'll say this, and this kind of ties into when I'm going to talk about difficulty in a little bit, is that the the game is pretty easy. So it does make it a little bit more challenging to incorporate or wanting to do more challenging things with the combat. You have the tools and you can, but a lot of the fights are so easy you don't need to. I was going to say one other thing about the combat. If I think about it. But overall, I would say this. The combat for me is like an 8 out of 10. It's like an 8 out of 10. All right. Let's talk about... I'm going to do this first. I'm going to talk about the characters of the game. I'm going to do this kind of quickly because this is spoiler territory. So I'm not going to mention a lot of names. Obviously, in my splash here, you see Clive and Joshua. So if you don't know who they are, sorry, I spoiled the first minute of the game. Clive is the main protagonist that you play throughout the game, and Joshua is his little brother, both of whom were featured in the very first trailer of the game. So, the characters in this game, for the most part, are top-notch, awesome characters. It's Final Fantasy, right? Almost every Final Fantasy has amazing characters. The question that I ask myself is, and I've been asking myself this while I've been, constantly playing through the game, is how many of these characters are going to be memorable? How many of these characters am I going to think about years from now? When Final Fantasy 17 comes out, am I going to think about Clive? Am I going to think about Joshua? I'm like, man, I really love Joshua. I really loved Clive. And I don't know. Especially when it comes to the main protagonist. Not a single Final Fantasy game I've ever played, the main protagonist was my favorite character. And that is definitely true in this game. If you know, you know for this game. Because there is a character... there's actually a couple characters that I really, really like in 16. Like a lot. And I'll say this. I think this game has some very memorable characters that people will remember for years to come. More so than, say, 15. Because in Final Fantasy 15, the only people I really remember that I think about, I do remember Noctis because he was the protagonist, right? I'm going to remember him whether I really want to or not. Because he's who I played the whole time. And, of course, the other characters, Prompto, Gladio, and Ignis, right? You remember all four of those guys. But other than that, I mean, I don't even remember the name of the girl. Was it Luna Freya, maybe? It might have been Luna Freya or something like that. I didn't care. Final Fantasy 13, yeah, I mean, again, I don't really care for Lightning or any of the other guys. 12, I mean, who is the main character really? Vaughn, I guess. Who cares about Vaughn? But Balthier, though, on the other hand, right? Final Fantasy X. Did anybody really like Titus as the main protagonist? The more you think about it, Titus actually is a very great character. It's just playing through the game, especially when I was younger, when it first came out, I didn't give a shit about Titus. Now, Auron, on the other hand, let's go, dude. I liked Auron Kamari, these are great characters. I mean, even Seymour as a villain was great. And you go further back, you have these characters, but did I care about Zidane? Really? Not really. Do I care about Squall? Really? Not really. Even Cloud? Not really. In Final Fantasy VI, who really is the main protagonist? Terra, I guess. Terra's actually probably one of the cooler ones. Final Fantasy V, we have Bartz. 4, Cecil. Cecil was pretty cool. And I can't remember going 1, 2, and 3, really. But there are characters here that you're going to remember, and they are all pretty fantastic. There was no character that I was like, oh, God. Here we go again. There was not a single one. Not one. Now that ties into the voice acting in the game. The voice acting in this game, there are 3 tiers of voice acting in this game. There is All right, these are the guys that were used for the random NPCs that you're going to talk to. Maybe you're going to grab a quest from Random Dude 101. You have the voice acting of some of the supporting cast, of the lesser supporting cast, but they're still like characters that you're going to talk to throughout the game. And then there's the main characters and the main cast. The main cast of this game, every single person nails it. Props to everyone. There's not a single person in the main cast of this game where their voice acting I thought was like, I guess, I don't know. I thought every single one was phenomenal. Now, go down one, like the lesser supporting cast, that they're not there all the time, but you still kind of do talk to them throughout the game. There's a few that are just as good as the others. And there's a few that are not. There's a few that are, they could do a little without. And I also realized I didn't tell you what I thought about the characters. In my opinion, the characters is a 9 out of 10. Combat, 8 out of 10, right? Okay. So the voice acting, yeah. And then going down on the lower peg of the voice characters, we're talking about like I said, the side quest characters, voice actors that are rehashed over multiple people, multiple characters and whatever. It's hit or miss. Some are good, some are really bad, some are in between. It's everything from amazing to, okay, this person is actually bad. And unfortunately, because of that, I have to give the voice acting an 8 out of 10. But I don't want that to distract from how good the main cast is. Especially, okay. This is one of the few times where I can say this, where the main character, and like I said, Clive is not my favorite character in the game, but I think he has some of the best voice acting in this game. And shout out to Ben Starr because he is the voice actor for Clive, at least for the English, and it is perfect. Clive is absolutely phenomenal. And so Ben Starr does an absolutely phenomenal job of bringing Clive to life, expressing his emotions, everything from sadness to being somber, angry, to like determined, to being chill, being kind of goofy a little bit. He's got it all, and he's absolutely fantastic. And in my opinion, he is the best voiced character in the game. There are some others that, like I said, that are of the supporting cast that are all top notch and are absolutely fantastic, but he shines above the rest. So I have to say that. Now, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because there's not much I can say without much spoilers, but the story. The story is Final Fantasy. If you like Final Fantasy, you're going to like this game. Now, as far as the story goes, if you like Final Fantasy 12, if you like Final Fantasy Tactics, you will fall in love with this story so much. Now, if for whatever reason you were somebody who hated the story of Tactics and you hated 12's story and you're like, oh, this story is so bad, all right, you might not like the story that much. But I feel like this game does a phenomenal job of engaging the player into the stories, that even if you're not really into this type of Final Fantasy story, you're still going to have a good time. And this kind of goes hand in hand with a negative that I'm going to talk about, or at least for me as a negative. And I didn't want to make a separate point about this, so I'm leaving this under the story catalog, is that this game was primarily developed by Creative Business Unit 3, which are the guys behind Final Fantasy XIV. And it is very apparent, so minor spoiler, there are a plethora of side quests in this game. And there are a lot of side quests that feel very Final Fantasy XIV. Feels very MMO questy, to the point that it's detrimental, in my opinion, to the experience. the story and what you're getting narratively and lore and everything about the world and the characters from the quest is all amazing. And then it's like, go pick me up 3 of these items. And it's just press X on the ground. What? You know, oh, can you go deliver this letter? Okay. You know, there's a lot of that. Now, I will say the side quests get better throughout the game. They start off really bad, and then they get better and better and better and better and better. But in terms of like what you're actually doing, not really. But the payoff becomes worth it. Because the story, I became so invested in the story of the world, the characters, and everything that's going on in Valisthea, because that's the name of their continent, or their world, or whatever, that I stopped caring how bad mechanically the side questing was, that I still enjoyed doing it. But it is, you still got it, you know, it is there. And unfortunately, that is how it was done. And another thing that I don't mind, for me, I don't really actually have an opinion one way or the other. Some people feel very strongly positively, and some people feel very strongly negatively, is the amount of cutscenes in this game. The amount of just talking. Anytime that stuff was related to the main quest, or whatever that you want to call it, the main storyline in your objective, I was engaged. Beginning to end. I didn't care. I mean, just do a cutscene for 30 minutes. I'm good. Just keep going. But some people don't want that. So I understand, right? I didn't really care. If there was a lot less of that, my opinion wouldn't change. It'd be the same. If there was even more of it, it would be the same. All in all, though, I'm going to give the story of this game a 9 out of 10 because it was so good that I stopped caring about how bad mechanically the side quests were, because the story was that good, because the stuff you got was so good from that. Just gotta get past I'm docking that one point off because the beginning side quests are really bad. So just brace yourself on that. They're really, really bad. All right, let's talk about the difficulty of the game. This game is extremely easy on a first playthrough. I think in terms of me not trying to do extra side stuff that was well out of my level and gear and stuff, I think I've died twice. I want to say maybe even only one time, but I want to say twice I died. Like I said, I died a few times trying to do some extra stuff that was well beyond what I should have been doing or anything like that. But in terms of like doing what I was supposed to be doing, I think I died twice. This game is beyond easy on a first playthrough. And I think that kind of goes along hand in hand with they're trying to make this game much more approachable and accessible to a larger audience, to people who don't play these games, that, you know, things like that. But they already had, so when you start the game up, you're given story mode or action mode. You're already giving them story mode. Let these people that don't know, you know, that they're new to these kind of games, let them play story mode. Let us people who've been playing video games their whole lives play a difficulty that makes more sense. Final Fantasy VII, back on the PlayStation 1, that game was hard, man. Like, the first time you play it, you know, you have to really think about your materia. You have to really think about your strategy of all this kind of stuff. And even then, you still might die a lot. Same thing, in my opinion, all the way through 13, I guess, because 15 was honestly pretty easy too. I don't think I died that many times in 15 either. And now I'll say this: I think there's a couple reasons for it being easy that's not related to the fact that they want it to be easier. Because 7 Remake was very easy too. The only times I really ever died, I think, in 7 Remake was doing the extra content. The main story content, I don't think I ever died. I mean, I might have. I can't remember. But all in all, I remember it being extremely easy. But it's because there's side quests, side content, extra things to gain power, to make yourself stronger before continuing on. And sure, in the older games, you could grind and grind and grind and grind, but most people didn't grind until they had to grind, right? That was, that's why it was called a grind. Because you're playing through the game, and then you hit a wall, and you're like, wow, I can't do this. I'm just not strong enough to do this. Okay, maybe if I gain a few levels, I can come back and I'll because all my stats will have gone up. I can handle better. I'm not gonna miss anymore. I'm gonna land on my hits, do more damage. I can take more damage. This game, you don't need to grind at all. Well, that's because there's all the side content, maybe. I don't know. It was super easy. And I'm going to talk about the crafting and the itemization in this game, in this section, because this goes kind of hand in hand with the difficulty and the ease of the game. I think Final Fantasy 16 kind of has a little bit of an identity crisis of not sure what kind of game it really wants to be. It's labeled as an action RPG, which I guess that's accurate, or as close as you're going to get. But it's not as in-depth mechanically as like a Devil May Cry action game. But as an RPG, it feels like a lot of the RPG elements to the game, are superficial. Leveling really has no purpose. There's really no point to level in this game. I mean, it kind of is. I mean, you gain stats, you gain more HP, a little more damage, a little bit of everything, and monsters have levels and things like that. Okay, I give it to you. The crafting and the itemization in this game is atrocious. It is bad. It is pointless and stupid and dumb. Okay, I'm just putting that right out there. It's really bad. Let's talk about the weapons. What do the weapon stats have? Damage up, damage down. The end. That's literally it. Every single weapon in the game. Damage up, damage down. Is it good or bad? That's it. And here's the one thing that I really didn't like. And I would have liked this a lot more. It would have been a small thing that would have made, in my opinion, a big difference. I don't know if it would have made enough difference to really, I don't know. It would have been a huge positive for me in that you kind of have a base of operations in this game, and every time you go there after you reach certain points in the main story, now you can buy the next level gear. Now you can buy the next level gear. Now you can buy the next level gear. So I don't ever have to explore. I never have to go. I'm just going to use Final Fantasy VII as an example because that's the first one that came to mind. I go from one town. You buy all the items and stuff and all the upgrades. Cool. You play through a section of the game. You reach the next town. Buy all the upgrades. Cool. You can say, okay, that's kind of the same thing you're doing here. You play through the game. You're playing through the game, you reach that, you go back, you get your upgrades, and then you play through the next segment of the game, you get your upgrades. Yeah, but I'm doing this all in the exact same location. There are towns and villages and vendors and everything throughout the whole game. Throughout this entire game, they exist. I would have liked it so much more if, say, okay, you go to X town, and I do know this is kind of spoilery stuff. Not too spoilery, but a little bit. Instead of it always being available at your base or whatever. Okay, maybe sword X is only available in this town. Sword Y is only available in this town. Sword Z is only available in this town. And okay, yeah, maybe later then the vendors can upgrade their merchandise. But no. And then it's the same thing with your two other pieces of equipment. Your belt and your bracers, same thing. It has defense and HP, up or down. That's it. Whole game, that's it. You get 3 jewelry slots. These are the things where you kind of there's a little more special customization. They either I'm not going to talk about it. I'll just say that they are better in terms of customizing your itemization stuff. But yeah, the crafting I feel like is pointless almost for the most part because the itemization is kind of pointless. The way that they do it, it's like, all right, I beat a boss. I got some loot. Now I use that exact loot to get the item. Okay, why not just have the boss give me the item? Why make me go through this superficial process? I don't know. I can go on about this for quite a while because this was actually a very frustrating point for me in the game. But this all ties into the fact that, in my opinion, that makes the game so easy because they know it's easy. So why make that stuff complicated? And we'll just have them do these extra steps to make it feel like the player is achieving more, even though they're not. I'm giving this game a 5 out of 10 in terms of like challenge, difficulty, and where this game should be at in terms of that kind of thing. Because it's bad, in my opinion. And I have already kind of been talking about a lot of the systems in the game. But let me talk about just some of the other stuff. As of making this video, they finally released the ability to turn off motion blur. So I played 95% of my game with motion blur on because I had no choice, and it was terrible. The performance in this game is sub 60 most of the time. When I'm using the menus, when I'm in the menu screen and I'm changing tabs, it lags all the time. I know I'm talking about all the negatives here. But yeah. But other than that, I think everything's fine. I think the controls are fine. I had no issues with the controls, except in the beginning. I wanted to use my evade button on circle, not on R1, which is kind of weird. They had a customization scheme where it would be on circle, but then it changed all the other buttons, and I didn't want to change the other buttons. So part of the patch today where they allowed you to now turn off motion blur, they also added more layouts. I would have preferred them to have full button mapping. That'd be nice, but console games very, very rarely allow you to do this. But all in all, I thought it was fine. The way the look of the UI, what you do in the UI, it's fine. Everything is fine. Like I said, the way that saves, everything. Oh, and I guess this kind of is a system and with difficulty that I don't like. I didn't really dawn on me because, like I said, I died so few times in the game. If you're in a boss fight, you reach checkpoints. You don't know you reach checkpoints, but you reach checkpoints. Because if you die, not only do you have no choice. The boss fight will kind of like pick up where you left off, and they'll already be missing health. You'll be restocked on all your potions, and it's like, what? No. So I did not like that at all, man. The motion blur thing was such a huge problem for me, though. And because of that, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10 on the systems. This video is going on pretty long, but luckily I'm at my last thing that I want to talk about, which is how Final Fantasy is this game. Ignore the social media, man. This game is Final Fantasy. They just probably didn't get past the first, 2 hours of the game. Because this game is Final Fantasy. Through and through. It's more Final Fantasy than a lot of the other Final Fantasy games, in my opinion. It is... Some of the stuff that happens in this game is like a love letter to the child in me when I played Final Fantasies in the 90s. It's so Final Fantasy. 10 out of 10 Final Fantasy game. All in all, overall, I'm giving Final Fantasy 16 an 8 out of 10. Yeah. Whether or not this is going to be my game of the year is going to be really, really hard. I'm going to actually predict it probably won't be, only because there are so many other amazing games that come out in 2023. But this game is phenomenal. In my opinion, it's a huge step up from 16. I'm not going to compare it to 7 Remake because that's like a spin-off thing. But yeah, I think this is my favorite Final Fantasy in the numbered games probably since 12. So that's a good thing. Anyways, guys, this is a long video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys for the next video.